Hello. So this will be the second video in the Digimon Tamers Allies slash Will Turn into Family series. This one is actually about the character that I feel goes through the largest change, the biggest change, the most drastic change throughout the course of the series. Season, series, whichever way you want to put it. And that is Mitsuo Yamaki. And he, as I stated in some of the other trainer for the Tamers, he starts off very much as an antagonist in the series. He is pretty much just like portrayed in the beginning as this antagonistic person that just has. He does not see Digimon as living things. He does not see them as things. Well, I wouldn't say that he thinks that they're things that shouldn't exist. He thinks that they're things that should not exist within the real world. He sees them as things that should be just in the digital world where they can't hurt anybody. Now, for Yamaki, side note, he's 32 years old and he has this very somewhat controlling personality. It's where he likes things to be where they're supposed to be or where he perceives they're supposed to be. And by the end of the series, by the end of the season, partway through the season, even all the way up to the end, he actually ends up becoming an ally to Takato and his friends, which I will go over. As I stated in both Rika and Itmon's videos, well, Rika and Renamon, and then Itmon and Ai and Mako's video, Yamaki is the one that goes through the biggest change, and then I would say that Itmon and then Rika, and kind of in that order, go through like the most dramatic changes in regards to their personality, the biggest paradigm shifts throughout the course of that season. And I mean, like in other seasons, we've had other characters, specifically in the second season of Digimon Adventures, where we have Ken, who starts off very blatantly as the villain, and then in the middle of the season, we get like all this stuff that happens where he was manipulated into being a villain, and then where he is then, fully an ally and everything by the end of it. First season had that a little bit with like Gatomon, because she started off as an enemy when Myotismon was first introduced, and then we see her, shift into being an ally, when she finds out that, Kari is supposed to be her partner. For Yamaki, it's a much more drastic type of a thing that happens for him. So, as I stated, within like the first episode, 2 episodes, the way that we are introduced to him is we are introduced to him through the system of Hypnos. Now, I will do a different video where I talk specifically about Hypnos itself, which is this government organization that he started that is, it's designed to be able to use the Earth's electronic and communication networks, secretly monitoring and recording information, of course, because duh. And he uses that to be able to track the Digimon. He refers to them as wild ones or anomalies, depending on the certain circumstances. And he kind of sees it as his job, or as he's kind of made it his job to use Hypnos and these other systems that he's developed, Yugoth and Juggernaut and a few other ones that I'll go over when I go over the Hypnos video, because I'll go into a lot more detail with those in that one, because Yamaki just deserves a video on its own, and then, Hypnos will have its own video. But what we see happen with Yamaki is, he's this man in the black suit that we see, and he has this like Zeppo lighter that he like flicks a whole lot and like messes with and fidgets with and everything. We have no Zeppo lighters in this house, so it's just like, I don't have anything to mess with. But he has a Zeppo lighter, and we just see him like clicking the Zeppo lighter back and forth and everything. And I don't think we ever actually see him smoke in the course of the series. I know at one point we see like the inside of his apartment, and I think maybe we see maybe an ashtray with some cigarettes in it on the table, but I don't remember exactly. But throughout the series, at the beginning of it, he's very much obviously the villain. He very much is, or not the villain, he's very much the antagonist to the children, because he wants to make the Digimon stay in the digital world. irony is not lost on anyone that his system that he developed of Hypnos is probably helping enable the Digimon to be able to come into the real world by having all of these connections. Probably help that process along. But Yamaki is intent on using, tracking the Digimon and then like destroying them before they can get into the digital, or before they can come from the digital world into the real world and bioemerge into the real world. He sees Digimon as they're just packets of data that have simply taken on a physical form. That's his pretty much his opinion of them in the beginning. Whereas like with Rika, she at least sees Digimon as like living things to a degree. She sees Renamon as like a living thing. And, Yamaki doesn't even see that. He doesn't even see the Digimon as something that should be alive, that shouldn't even exist in, the real world. By technicality, he's right, but, it's technically right, but, there's a difference between that. Throughout the first several episodes, he's very much like, oh, we'll use his, the system of in Hypnos to be able to like track the Digimon and then use that to be able to find a way to destroy them. At one point, he has several interactions throughout the course of the first several episodes, or the first third of the season or so. The season's like 51 episodes long or something like that, so it's just like, when did that happen? But he has, he ends up like finding out that there's, because the anomalies just keep like disappearing at various points, and he's like, okay, so what was that? Well, that wasn't our system that did it, so it couldn't have been that. So it's just like it just vanished. And then he's just like, okay, well, he goes and like investigates it, and he ends up finding Takato and Henry and eventually Rika. And he ends up, seeing them with their Digimon. He sees Takato and Gilmon and Henry and Terriermon. I don't remember if, like, during that time frame, if he ever actually sees, like, Rika with Renamon in that time frame, but he definitely sees Takato and Henry with their Digimon. And then at one point, because he, of course, has access to all the government information, he, like, figures out who Henry and Takato are. And eventually he does figure out, I think, who, like, Rika is, too. But he ends up, he actually ends up confronting them, like, kind of like, the guy in black, the government agent in black showing up and like kind of, it's like, maybe you shouldn't do this anymore. It's government agent mafia setup, I guess. It's like, it'd be a shame for anything to happen, type of a thing. And he somewhat threatens them, but he's somewhat threatening them for their own safety, which I know doesn't necessarily make sense, but he somewhat threatens Takato and Henry in regards to, like, you're playing a dangerous game, you don't know exactly what you're involved with, all this type of stuff. And he just, he just does not want, part of him, I don't think, wants the kids to get hurt, but it's also, he doesn't think that they're able to comprehend how dangerous this situation is. And he ends up, he, develops even more programs that are designed to, you got the Juggernaut, that are designed specifically to try to, destroy the Digimon. And we even have this one episode where he kind of has to end up, like, re-explaining, like, and it's kind of done in a good way, because it's, like, explaining what Hypnos is to the audience, but having him explain it to, like, a bunch of government people. That are, like the cabinet secretary and like a bunch of these other superiors that Yamaki has to answer to. And like, he's like having like this, basically like a Zoom meeting before there was Zoom meetings. Or he's like talking with them and like explaining to them what's going on. One guy's golfing, one's in their car, like two of them are in their office or whatever. And Yamaki's trying to explain to them, what Hypnos is, what what the wild ones are, and everything, that there are these creatures, Digimon and everything. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember when Yamaki actually uses the term Digimon. He usually refers to them like anomalies or wild ones for the most part. And, he's trying to explain to them, and then we have this other point where, like, another government agent shows up, and, like, he has to, like, explain to them what Hypnos is. And it's kind of funny to a degree. And we also have these other moments where we see him interact with Riley, who is actually Riley and Tally are the two ladies that I say they're there. They sit in the chairs and they kind of help, analyze and like relay information to and from Yamaki. And they're the ones that kind of are in charge of like, setting up the programs and stuff like that. And they're probably very smart in their own right. I don't remember if we ever get exactly what, like any degrees that Yamaki has, but considering the fact that we see him, like he's able to design his own programs in regards to Yugoth and Juggernaut that he develops in and of himself before he even gets involved with the Monster Makers with Henry's father and such, which I'll get to, but we see him develop these different programs already, and he's probably the one that like built Hypnos and everything. So Yamaki in and of himself is actually extremely smart and extremely good with computers and different things along those lines, with coding and those types of things. So he's very good at that. So it's not like he's an idiot that doesn't understand how computers work trying to run this government agency that is all about, this agency that's all about computers. It's not like he's, that type of a thing. He knows what the computers are supposed to do. It's the Digimon are things that are supposed to be digital that keep coming into the real world, and it kind of messes with his, preconceived notions of things. And, the way that he has seen the world for however long, for however long it is that he's had this point of view. And, we never really get anything about like his backstory. I think like there's like some various magazine at some point said that was like, oh, there was something to do with like his father who was very controlling, and that's why Yamaki is this way and everything. So I don't really know exactly if that's the case. But I went off on a tangent, sorry. The main person other that we see him interact with is Riley, who is throughout the course of the series kind of his, romantic interest or so. And she's, her and Tally, and Riley and Tally are going to get the next video, and then I'll do Hypnos after that. Because all three of them are basically the three people that we see in Hypnos, but Hypnos has some stuff on its own as well. And, things that we see happen is, Riley and Yamaki, we see them, I don't know if I would call it flirt. I don't really think I would call it flirting. It's not really flirting that they do, but she clearly has like some type of feelings for him, and eventually I'm assuming he reciprocates it. But one of the things that we do see happen is, Yamaki, as I said, at one point he goes and he somewhat threatens Staccato and Henry, and then he ends up actually gathering up, he ends up activating one of the programs, which is called, is that the Yugoth program that he does that with, or is that the Juggernaut program? I don't remember exactly which one is which. But one does one thing, one does another. They're both designed to destroy Digimon one way or the other. But what ends up happening is, I'm trying to figure out how I can describe this. They activate the program, and the way that it's designed is it's supposed to basically like lure in a bunch of Digimon, and it basically acts kind of like a giant Digimon magnet, I'm assuming. And like it even at one point we see it like affect Gilmon and Renamon and Terriermon to a degree. And actually one of the programs is actually responsible for when it appears for Staccato that Gilmon kind of gets deleted, and that Henry and him and Rika have to go and find Gilmon and then get him to a safe, find him and like pull him out of this digital field, and then Gilmon's fine. But that was happening because of programs that Yamaki had designed. And, we kind of see as the different Digimon bio emerge into the real world that, Yamaki and Riley and Tally are the three that are mainly the ones that are keeping an eye on it. There's like other scientists and computer people and whatever that like are helping run Hypnos and everything, but they're the main ones. And as I said, at one point he even captures a Digimon and ends up experimenting on it. And that's kind of disturbing when he like captures it, and there's big black vans that show up to capture it and drag it off and everything, and that's kind of disturbing. And one of the things that happens is, as I said, he activates one of the programs. Again, I cannot remember which one it is. I think it's Yugoth, whichever program it is that he activates. But the building that Hypnos is in basically acts as like this focal point, and it starts drawing in all of these different Digimon. And this is when the first Deva appears. This is when Mihiramon appears, the Tiger Deva. And it's this extremely powerful wild one. And, Yamaki and the others can't do anything about it. Yamaki actually ended during this time had, like, Henry at one point, like, by the collar, holding up, and it was like, this is all because of you and your pets, your digital pets and everything. Like, he doesn't care. And, he's like, this was supposed to work, but it didn't work. And this is, I think, part of where we start to see his paradigm shift start to happen. But, that's when, as I said, that's when Mihiramon shows up, and, Chikado is the one that ends up defeating it and everything. Yeah, he, like, throttles Henry at one point. He's like, oh, it's not worth it, like, drops him and everything. He had, I think at one point he even tried to, like, organize a military strike against Mihiramon, and that didn't work. Thankfully Takado was able, with the War Groundmon, was able to defeat him and everything. And then of course that's when they have to start dealing with all of the Devas that start coming into the real world. And Yamaki's just kind of seeing a lot of this happen. And this is when he goes and he finds Jonyu, Henry's father, and brings him in. And he's like, okay, well, I have some of your friends here, and insert the rest of the monster makers that are there from, his old college buddies and everything that were the ones that developed Digimon. And, he ends up, he's just like, okay, so this is Hypnos, this is the system. We have these different programs. We're trying to use them to be able to, like, destroy / keep the Digimon in the digital world so they can't come here. And within this time frame is, I think, when Jonyu, like, finds out that Henry is one of them, one of the tamers that has Digimon. And that's kind of an interesting moment for Jonyu when that happens. But throughout the time that the Devas keep appearing, they keep trying other systems and programs and stuff like that, and it doesn't work. And it doesn't go well for Yamaki in that regard. But we do kind of start to see this paradigm shift for him. And then when Vicarolamon, the boar Deva, the pig Deva, appears, that is somewhat, I think, I wouldn't say it's somewhat a specific reaction to what Yamaki did, but I think something that he did kind of, like, help open the gates for Vicarolamon to come through. And, so there's the huge giant boar Deva going through, the downtown Tokyo or whatever city it is that they're in, going through there, causing a ton of problems. They try throwing missiles at it, and that doesn't do anything. This is, when Takado, Rika, and Henry all have to work together, all fully, digivolve up to the ultimate forms in order to defeat him and everything. And during that time is when Yamaki really has this big, I would say, an external crisis type of thing that happens for him, because he just, like, sees what happened with Vicarolamon, and he sees that, like, part of his programming was something that allowed this thing to come into the real world. And that's when he starts to realize that, oh, stuff that I've done has been affecting this, that I'm kind of the one that caused some of this in the first place. And I wouldn't say that he quits, but he kind of just, like, goes home, and I guess goes on sabbatical or something, and, like, Riley shows up, and Yamaki somehow figures up that, like, the kids are going to do something, because this is when it lines up from when Calamon is kidnapped by Makuramon, by the monkey Deva, and, like, the kids have to go to the digital world. And, Riley's, like, kind of somewhat taking care of Yamaki, I guess. Is kind of what happening. It's kind of what we see happen. She's somewhat, like, taking care of him, like, making sure that he eats and everything. And, we see Yamaki ends up actually making this kind of communication device that he ends up, he, like, figured out where Takado and his friends were going to meet up, and he, found them there, and he gives them the communication device, and he kind of wishes them well. And, throughout the whole series, or throughout the whole first part, he's, like, always wearing, like, these sunglasses and everything. I think even when they're inside, he's wearing the sunglasses, because it's like, okay, dude, were you, like, a rejected Men in Black? Were you rejected by the Men in Black? Were you, are you connected to them or whatever? I guess Digimon are some form of, like, an alien creature. But what ended up happening, he actually ends up taking off the glasses, and it's one of the rare times we see him not with his sunglasses on. And, he like wishes them well and sends them off. And throughout this time frame, as I said, that's when Takato and his friends go to the digital world, and eventually Takato does try using the communication device to communicate back to Yamaki. During this time in the real world, Yamaki had ended up between Yamaki, Jonyu, and the Monster Makers. They gathered up the parents of the Tamers and like explained to them what was going on, where their kids were, why they're in the digital world in the first place, what kind of Digimon are to a degree, and kind of what's been going on, because the parents apparently didn't know. Well, they knew because of Akiramon that Digimon were real, but there's a difference. And what ends up happening is, my note says Yamaki was wallowing in self-pity and cigarettes. Self-pity and cigarettes. Probably a lot of alcohol too in that regard. Riley's the one that kind of snaps him out of that. He still has some good left to do, is what she convinces him, and that's why he ends up making the communication device for the kids to then, for them to take and use to communicate back and forth with him in the digital world. And it so happens that while they're having the meeting with the parents, that's when Takato does communicate with them and like sends a message, and Yamaki like shows it to Takato's dad, and it's like, yeah, this is from Takato and everything. Admittedly, it could have been easily faked, but we as the audience know that that's not true, and Yamaki at this point in time does not seem like he would do that. And what ends up happening is, he lets them communicate with their parents and everything, and then so they know that they're okay. And then it's just like, okay, well, we need to find a way to get the kids back to the real world. So this is when Yamaki and the Monster Makers all start working on the ARC that they end up trying to make. They start working on the ARC program that is designed to be able to act as basically an ARC, like Noah's Ark, and then use that to like transport the kids from the digital world back to the real world. And so it's him and the Monster Makers, and probably Riley and Tally to the best of their ability, working on trying to, build this arc within the program and everything, and, all of that. So we see, like, kind of what Yamaki, it's kind of his programming skills go into that and everything. And I think they end up actually using part of the Juggernaut system or something like that. No, I don't think it's the Juggernaut system. They use some form of code that, like, he helps with to, like, develop the arc and everything so the Tamers can get back. And during this time frame, he also had to, like, deal with, his superiors being like, hey, what's all this going on and everything. Like, yes, like, explain to them, I'm assuming, what's going on as well. But then we get what is just one of my favorite images in all of the series, and I talked about this in Susie's video. We have this moment where, like, Jonyu and Susie are playing around at the park and everything, because Susie's missing Terriermon, and, Yamaki met up with them, and, Jonyu and Yamaki are, like, discussing, the history of the Digimon project and everything, and then at one point we just get this moment where, the three of them, two grown men, one of them in Yamaki, still in his black suit and everything, or very dark blue suit, sitting on this bench with Susie in the middle, the little girl in the middle between them, and, they're just, like, talking about, like, serious things, and then Susie's just like, I'm gonna go play on the jungle gym. Okay, sweetie, just stay where I can see you. And, and Susie wanders off. And this is when Susie gets, sucked into the digital world. And, for Yamaki's part, he did try to help Jonyu get to her. Didn't work very well, but he tried. They both fell down the slide, which was kind of funny. And, he's like, well, if she's in the digital world, that's where Henry is. So hopefully she'll be safe. We know that Susie ends up being safe, but, now Jonyu has to go home and tell his wife that that their other young child is missing, is gone, and which I'll get to when I do the Jonyu and like Henry's family video. But what ends up happening is, that's during the time where they're working on getting the arc and everything, and during the events in the digital world when, when Leomon gets killed by Gyalzamon. There's this moment where when Gilmon kind of corrupt Digivolves into Magidramon, all of these hazard signals are going off in the real world within like Hypnos' system. They're like, okay, this is not good. So there's like they're all very, very concerned about that, which they should be. And then after everything calms down with that, when once Takato, Rika, and Henry can all biomerge and everything with their Digimon and everything, that's when Yamaki tells them, okay, so we've got this arc ready, and it'll be at this point in time. And this is after the Tamers had kind of learned about the D Reaper and everything, and Jerry's been swapped with the D Reaper agent. Not that they know that. And so they have they're supposed to go and meet up at the certain spot where the arc's going to appear. And we have Yamaki working very hard with the rest of the monster makers and such to work on getting the arc where it's supposed to be at the right time and everything. And the kids get on the arc, and they're monitoring the progress of the arc as it's returning to the real world. And it stops at one part. They're like, oh my god, why did it stop? And it keeps going and everything. And that was when they needed to get Takato onto the arc and everything. And we see a bunch of that. And then, of course, Yamaki is there when, like, the kids return from the digital world. And he's, like, really, he is happy that they've returned because it was this successful arc, this successful mission that, like, okay, so they got to the digital world. They got Calamon. They lost Renamon, or they lost Leomon, unfortunately. They brought Rio back with them. I still have no idea how they figured out who Rio's father was. Unless it was like, well, we found this other random kid. His name's Rio Akiyama. Can you tell his dad that he's okay? So he eventually showed up. Yamaki is, he's happy that the kids are okay and everything. And then what ends up happening is when the D Reaper emerges into the real world, it actually centers itself around the Hypno building and engulfs a huge portion of the Hypno building and a huge amount of the city of Shinjuku en masse. Yamaki and the rest of the group, the Monster Makers and Tally and Riley and anybody else that works for Hypnos at that point in time had to get out of the building really quickly, and they set up in a different building, in the Tokyo Tower building, I guess. And that's where they're working. And at this point in time, the kids are like kind of staying at staying at the school, then going to the bakery, and like Yamaki, Riley, and Tally show up at the bakery at where Takato's parents' bakery, and he's like, looks at Riley and he's like, wait a second, I know you. You buy those day-old bagels. And she goes, and Yamaki goes, those bagels were day-old. I just love that bit. That's just like funny little moment from Yamaki. And this is when Yamaki learns from the kids more about what the D Reaper is, what they learned in the digital world. And, he ends up explaining them, okay, so that's what's going on. Okay, that makes somewhat sense. And so that allows, the monster makers to start working on like something that they can use to help fight against the D Reaper. And, Yamaki even goes and tries to, reason with the military that have shown up trying to deal with the D Reaper. He's trying to, reason with them that you can't just throw bombs at this thing because it's not going to work. Eventually they do listen, and they actually end up throwing in like listening devices and cameras and stuff like that so they can actually see what's going on inside the D Reaper. So there's they listen eventually, but he's trying to reason with them, and that didn't work. And then throughout the time, he also ends up having Daisy, who is one of the monster makers, and he talks to her and he's like, okay, so well, we're still receiving a signal from the arc, so do you think that you could do something to help make the arc better, to like kind of fix it, make it, better type of a thing? And she does, and she works on it, and that ends up, she redesigns it, and that ends up becoming Grawny, which I'll do a different video on Grawny. But, so they work on developing Grawny, and then of course, Grawny becomes real, and he goes into the real world, and he, fights alongside Takato and, Gilmon as, and Gallantmon for a while. And we have those, that happen and everything. And then during that time frame, that's when they find out that actually the kids have been combining with the Digimon. And that's when Yamaki just has like another one of these OF moments. Where he's just like, he's like very, because he's like, he'd been trying to do what he could to like protect the kids as best he could. But, when he finds out that they can biomerge, we get this moment where he's like banging against the glass He's like banging against the glass of the window, and he's just like, oh my god, how did I not know that they were combining with the Digimon? I didn't know it had gotten that far yet. He may have said that bad in a different translation, but I didn't know it had gotten that far yet. I didn't know that they had been able to do that. That just makes things so much harder in regards to like trying to figure out a way for them to be able to fix the D-Reaper problem. And so he's trying to help, work with the monster makers and everything to figure out what's going on. And he blames himself for what happens, for this conflict has even had to reach this point. He's blaming himself for that. But he quickly regains his composure and like quickly is like, okay, so this is what he does, and he puts his all into like figuring out what's going on and figuring out okay, so we can communicate with like Takato and everything now, and all this other stuff, and like how to like work with Takato to figure out to cause some damage to the D-Reaper. And then they put the Yugoth part of the Yugoth program into Grani to be like a blaster that Grani can use, which is kind of cool. I'm like, okay, that's cool. You get points for that. That's pretty cool. Let's give the the flying arc some guns. Okay. And what we see end up happening is, when the final battle for, against the D-Reaper happens, Yamaki is ready, and they end up developing Operation Doodlebug, that's where they put part of, or the Juggernaut program into Terriermon, and then they end up, directing Henry in how to activate the program and everything. And that results, him and Terriermon as Mega Gargamon spinning really, really quickly inside of part of the D-Reaper that's supposed to like suck all the D-Reaper in and make it de-evolve. And that works, reverts the D-Reaper to its original harmless form and everything. And Yamaki, just like with Janyu, he did not tell Henry what was going to happen, after that, after everything that went on with the Juggernaut program. And that is where after the battle is finished, that's all the Digimon glow and shrink and go back to the digital world. And I'm assuming that Henry probably has some words with Yamaki when he sees him again. Assuming several of the Tamers end up having words with Yamaki when they find out about that. But we get this monologue from Yamaki that like shows how far he's come from his despise, how much he despised Digimon and everything up till, where he is by the end of the series.
The nightmare finally ended. It still seems strange that a misguided program could cause so much damage believing it was doing the right thing. Maybe we have more in common with the D-Reaper than we'd like to believe, but today we won by coming together, which makes me believe there's hope for us. All of us.
So we get that, and then kind of like where Yamaki ends up ending the series, the sometime later section, we do see him and Riley are actually at, Yamaki's in like a tracksuit, which is just kind of funny. They're at the Matsuki bakery, Takato's parents' bakery, and getting food and everything. So that's just kind of funny. It shows him and Riley are together and everything. Yamaki really has no part in the first Digimon movie, but he is fairly involved in the second one in regards to part of like them figuring out the plot with the Runaway Locomon movie. He shows up at like the Tokyo, like the train depot, I guess, command station, when everything starts happening with Locomon, and he's like kind of directing the people that work there on what to do, and like, okay, so we need to do this, we need to do that. The train's going around and around and around. Well, it's supposed to only go around once, but it's going around, and it's opening up a portal in the sky, and that's going to drop more Parasimon at the time down. And we see him communicate with Takato and everything, and he's communicating with Tally and everything, and Riley, and helping figure out what's going on and everything, getting updates from Takato and Henry and such. And eventually, by the end of it, they're relieved when all the Parasimon are destroyed and Locomon's gone and heads back to the digital world. There's not really anything else that happens. He's not at Rika's birthday party, which is somewhat, just like, yeah, no, I don't see a reason why he'd be there. But Rika seems to have some she's not happy with Yamaki in part of the movie. And the thing is that I think what they did was, because in the movie, Rika kind of goes into this hypnotized state where she's being controlled by Parasimon, and he's making her dream, and she's dreaming about her father. And I believe they had the same voice actor voice her father that voices Yamaki. Same voice actor also voices Gilmon in his form, so it's not like it was an intentional thing of just like, oh, well, we'll do that. But it's just like, it's a similar voice to Yamaki. Also, I do find it funny that the same guy that voices Yamaki also voices Gilmon, which is just like, okay, that's fun. It's Steve Bloom, if you were wondering. Yeah, so there's not really too much else that we get with Yamaki. Yeah, as I said, there was some UK official Digimon comic or something like that that said something about like Yamaki is part of his personality is like from his father and everything. It was like his father was very, very strict and disciplinarian and everything, and that very impacted, Yamaki's view of the world and order and control and everything. And such. But as I stated, he's the one that goes through this biggest, paradigm shift, this biggest character change, this character evolution throughout the course of the series. Yes, Takato gets braver. Yes, Henry gets better when it comes to like figuring out the right times and the right reasons to fight. Rika becomes much more in communication with her own emotions and how she feels about Renamon and her mother and her grandmother and everything. And yeah, all of them get braver, but Yamaki is the one that goes through this where he just sees Digimon as nothing that, as things that shouldn't exist in the real world, that they're just clumps of data, to actually kind of not wanting to actually cause the kids pain, but it was like they had to make the choice between, it was either the Digimon or the world. And yeah, he made that decision, and I'm sure that he's sorry about it, but I'm also, clearly, by the, because of the Locomon movie, it's clearly he knows that the Tamers have their Digimon back, so it's not like it didn't work out in the end, but he's still probably sorry about it. And I'm assuming Hypnos is still going at that point in time because, we still see Riley and Tally there. And he's still using Hypnos to do what he needs to like, help protect the world. I'm assuming what ended up happening was like, once like the Digimon found their way back to the real world, once, the Tamers and their Digimon are reunited, either that's, the Tamers went to the digital world and brought them back, or the Digimon came back into the real world, one of the two. I'm assuming basically what ended up happening is that like, maybe it ended up being that like Yamaki and Riley and Tally and Hypnos, like they would maybe use the Hypnos system to be able to track where like the Digimon were coming in from, any of the wild ones. And then, Takato and the rest of them, like he would communicate to them and say, hey, go here and do this. And, they are, well, not like ordering them around like he's their boss or whatever, but like, helps them, find where where they are, like helps cover anything up that needs to be covered up if necessary. So maybe that was the case. Maybe that's what ended up happening later on. I don't know. We never really find out, but that's just kind of what I like to think. So that's what we have. I thank you very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. And the next one will be Tally and Riley. So thank you. Bye.